Saluton, Jeff. Saluton, which means hello in Esperanto. So,
Good morning.
stage is yours.
Hi, good morning, Hamburg. I'm Jeff, and as Aaron already said, I'm working for Filmo, which I guess he gave it away. I'm actually, after this last talk, I'm going to talk about something less controversial, just the weather. More specifically, lightning. Okay, the Lightning Network. It's not only Bitcoin, but the most work is done on Bitcoin, so it's pretty much what I'm going to talk about, the Bitcoin Lightning Network, but you can also understand it as the Litecoin Lightning Network. It's more of a general concept. So we are all here for one reason today, and that's Bitcoin. If we didn't have Bitcoin, all of us wouldn't be here today. So I think that's the least common denominator, I would say. Don't you agree? Because Bitcoin, that's Bitcoin, mother of all blockchains. It has a couple of features, and I'm not going to go into detail because you probably all know this. I can ask a question right now, right? Because everybody's been asking questions. Who of you does hodl Bitcoin? Okay, and just to see, is there anybody who holds a cryptocurrency but doesn't hold Bitcoin? Okay, so you actually exist. I just thought you were a myth. All right, Bitcoin has a couple features. It's decentralized, it has an immutable ledger, and it is censorship resistant, just as a couple of features. But it also has something that you could see as bugs, if you will. And those are, the Bitcoin blockchain is relatively slow. It's relatively expensive, and also not really private. I mean, transactions are not really private. You might have heard about one instance where a couple years after the fact a transaction happened, a government three-letter agency could find out what transaction was done, would put it on somebody and actually jail that person. Just as an example. We are right now having the problem that you cannot really pay your coffee with Bitcoin anymore. And this is, and has been a whole big debate. The more neutral term is maybe the block size debate. Some have even adopted the Bitcoin civil war, and it kind of found its like peak point last summer, and also pretty much during the past year when there were certain forks and people were sort of not satisfied by the speed of the evolvement that Bitcoin should have. So, and also transaction costs got relatively high. So we got put right into that big scaling debate. And the question really is, how can we solve the coffee payment problems? How can we make coffee payments? And of course, it's just an example, okay? I'm not really talking, it's a figurative coffee. How can we make those doable again without, while using the security of Bitcoin? So how can we make Bitcoin ready for the masses? How do we properly scale? And I think it's safe to say, and this is not only a Bitcoin-specific conclusion, but blockchains do not really scale on-chain. You cannot put everything in a blockchain. That's also like CryptoKitties on Ethereum was the best example for that. It worked pretty well and it's pretty cool, but it showed a bunch of problems. So what we're looking at right now is more seeing Bitcoin as a settlement layer, as a really, really solid foundation. And on top of that settlement layer, we're putting other layers, second layers, third layers. Diego has already illustrated that point pretty well. You remember the Lego picture, the Lego slide, where you can put one layer on top of each other? Yes, do you? Okay. So that's basically second layers. And this is where, as one solution, the Lightning Network comes in. Boom! So the Lightning Network is basically a network of payment channels. I'm not going to go into great details more about the concept right now, but the really important thing is that each payment channel is anchored on the Bitcoin blockchain. So what you do, you kind of have a gateway towards the Lightning Network. You open a channel where you, so to speak, lock in Bitcoin. It's fully backed. You always have control. But you put it on a second layer, just in between two people in a channel, where you can, so instead of putting every transaction on the blockchain, and for updates, you just change the state of the channel. So Alice and Bob have a channel, and they make updates where they buy their coffee and sell their coffee and whatever. So you do not need to put every coffee transaction on the channel. Now, this is a relatively old concept. I think Mike Hearn already explained it in 2011. So it's the basic concept of payments channels has been around. And what the Lightning Network does is just pretty much add some routing and build a network of payment channels. It sounds fairly simple. I can try to explain that a little better. This is sort of the blockchain. Everybody who's participating has all the information about everybody and is pretty much chatting and updating all the time. It's also called the broadcast model. That's what's happening in the Bitcoin blockchain right now. Every transaction is broadcasted to everybody in the network, to every node, who can then also verify the validity of that transaction. Now, this is really good for base security, and this is what makes the Bitcoin blockchain so strong and such a strong foundation. And now the Lightning Network and payment channels is more like Chinese whispers, you know, kind of a unicast. Only the people that are involved in a transaction need to know about the transaction. So the first little girl wants to do a transaction, and she kind of routes it through the other girls until the last girl receives it. And keep in mind, this is happening on a second layer, but each of these girls always has the ability to immediately put it back on chain and has the complete safety of the main Bitcoin blockchain. Okay, I'm kind of doing it a little short here. There's also a lot of cryptography involved. And again, it's not really my goal here to explain that to you because 20 minutes is just too little. But I think you get the idea. So all the channels are cryptographically locked, and it's based on the Bitcoin blockchain. If you want to look it up, one of the main mechanisms is HTLCs. It's hash time locked contracts, which enables participants to safely sort of route pre-signed payments in between each other. But this is a topic for a different talk. Now, the Lightning Network and also, again, second layer solutions, this is not the only thing that works. Rootstock is another one. You could see Counterparty as the second layer, and there's so many others that are coming up and are being worked in. The major improvement is that you have instant payments, just like you're used from cash payments. You give somebody €5, it's instantly paid. That's the same speed on the Lightning Network. You have extremely low costs. I do not want to say no costs, because that's when we first started sort of being excited about Bitcoin. Everybody thought it would be really low cost, but in the end, the fee market won. So, but we're talking about millisatoshis here. The standard unit is a millisatoshi, which is, what is it, 1,000th of a satoshi. So that's, can somebody do the math for me while I'm talking? It's really just a tiny fraction of a cent. It does have enhanced privacy, because not every, or most transactions are actually only done between the people that are just the recipient and the sender. So not the whole network knows about your transactions, but only the sender and the recipient. And it offers massive scalability already. There's one of the theoretic capacities of just one channel is up to 500 transactions per second. And now you already have a network of channels, So you can do the math. I don't want to oversell it. I mean, if I say we already have millions of transactions possible, it might be a little bit too much because there's also some challenges ahead. But the important thing is we can do this while keeping all the safety features of Bitcoin. We are using the base layer, the blockchain, as the foundation, and this is really important to understand, and I can't really say this enough. It just, now there's so many possibilities that were possible and were conceived years ago when people first heard about Bitcoin, but it became unfeasible. And there's even more. We can have, by now, decentralized, trustless, and instant exchanges. That is if you really want to convert your Bitcoin into an altcoin. But you could, in theory. You can have streaming money. You pay as you stream, for example, for data. You can have machines paying each other. And there's actually a company working on that right now, and they have a prototype. So this is not one of the claims that sometimes projects like to do, where they talk about the future in maybe 5 years when they have like some coin for the Internet of Things or whatever. But this is actually possible right now. And finally, we can pay for coffee again. I think that's pretty great. So where do we stand today? What's the status quo of the Lightning Network? Some people say it's vaporware, and it's really not. We already have a live network. This is what it looks like today. The little yellow dots, I think they're, yeah, sorry, the graphics is a little shitty, but all the white dots are nodes. All the lines are payment channels, and they all together form the network. So this is one way to visualize that. There's about, I think, 2,500 nodes, or 3, running up, and we have about 9,000 payment channels open right now. And this is after the first live network, mainnet payment channel went online in January. So it's not even been 6 months. The whole Lightning Network can be seen as a protocol that is under active open source development. So just like Bitcoin, everything that's being developed is openly sourced. You can go to GitHub, check out the code, and contribute to the code. And those implementations are based on the Lightning Network specifications, which are also called BOLT, which is short for Basics of Lightning Technology. There's, I think, 12 standard specs right now, which all the implementations are referring to. And those are the main implementations right now in different languages. And as I said, they are all open source projects. LND, the first one, just released their latest update yesterday, so they are in beta 0.42, and they had 30 contributors to their code. So it's also a completely decentralized way of developing the protocol, which is mimicking Bitcoin in a way. Now, what we're waiting for, we're pretty early on. This is still, to some way, work in progress. So what's happening right now is there's a bunch of consumer-friendly wallets just coming out. There's just like 1 or 2 for every platform, but there's more and more coming. There's at least half a dozen for iOS and Android, for example. I think I kind of beat them today, but there's one major release planned for today for Android. It's called the Bitcoin and Lightning Wallet for Android, which has been under development for 6 months. And it should be released later today. Unfortunately, it's not released yet. I couldn't really push the developer to do me the favor to announce it here. But those are all in development, and we're seeing more and more. And also, of course, on the second layer, on the Lightning Network, a lot of Lightning apps or labs are being built. So all the possibilities that I mentioned earlier will be in the form of labs for IoT, for money streaming. So there's a lot of development going on there. And if you want to dig a little deeper, we are doing a series of hackathons or hack days in Berlin. It's called the Lightning Hack Day. You can scan that. It leads you to the meetup page. It's at the end of June. So if you're a developer or interested in learning more about the technology, also from a more technical perspective, we'll have a 3-hour talk just talking about the how everything works, how the cryptography works. So I'm happy if you want to join me there. Finally, I would say the Lightning Network is making Bitcoin ready for the masses. Now the only question is, are the masses ready for Bitcoin? Thank you.
Let me ask the first question. The Lightning Network is kind of controversial. I mean, there are propaganda videos on the internet saying, wow, this will be totally centralized, the banks take over. What do you say to this criticism?
Well, you do not, if you open a node, if you connect to the Lightning Network, you have a freedom of choice. You can connect to whatever node you want. So if you have fear of centralization or censorship, all you have to do is connect to a different node. So if you do not like the Federal Reserve node, you don't have to use it. And if you can, I'm going to, oh sorry, it's already. It's pretty much a decentralized system, and the way it looks right now, I showed the graphics earlier, that's what it looks to become, how it's developing. I don't see a centralization in the sense that there's hubs that can tell you what to do and not to do, and you will not be able to participate without going through these hubs or nodes. That's not happening. Okay. And I think it's really unlikely, because it's just like Bitcoin. You can open your own node and connect to whatever you want, and also circumvent whatever node you want.
I would like to hear Sterling's opinion on that, because you are kind of against the Lightning Network, right? You opted out for fork because you don't believe in that second layer. Is that correct, with Bitcoin Cash?
Yeah, I'm not.
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not completely for the Lightning Network, but that's not to say that I'm not antagonistic towards your goals. If you can make Bitcoin usable for coffee again, absolutely fine. The beautiful thing about Bitcoin Cash is it's already usable for coffee and has already grown to 32 megs, and we can scale on-chain.
Oh, sorry, Bitcoin is right now also usable for coffee. It's just not scalable for coffee.
Unless we get to the same point in time that we were in December, when fees were $20 per transaction. Right?
That's a feature, not a bug. It's for safety.
So it's a feature to have high fees.
This is a discussion that people had a long time, and I don't think this is the time or place to get into that.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's just, you and I can talk later about it. We don't have to get into it. Yeah, I mean, my problem with the Lightning Network is I don't have like huge problems with it. Okay, if it works, it works. You know, I would even be willing to use it. But I am kind of afraid of this idea that once the Lightning Network goes up, there's a possibility of double spending attacks, since we're working on a second layer solution rather than on the settlement layer. That's a concern. Another concern that I've had about the Lightning Network is that Blockstream is simply going to use that network so they can subsidize themselves by using it as a revenue model that takes funding away from the miners. So that's also a possibility. I know that's been sort of one of the things talked about by people developing Lightning Network. The idea is that there's too much centralization in mining, right? So we need to get transactions away from miners, and that's been a consideration for folks in the Lightning Network. I personally don't think the problem on Bitcoin of mining centralization is an actual issue because of law of accelerating returns, which I talked about. Moore's law, the growth of computing speed, is all going to grow along with scaling on-chain. So I think that problem is naturally fixed because of what we know about technology.
Those were a lot of points you made. Like a couple, I guess.
Maybe let's take it. I would suggest you continue the discussion, this inside discussion, in the break, which we have soon. Right. But let's allow more questions from the audience. Yeah, sorry, please. See you. You get a mic. Get a mic from Oscar himself.
Yeah, I think I just want to kind of shorten the fear, or the question is, do you think that if Lightning takes off, then there won't be a lot of fees for the miners, and then in the future, when there's no block reward, then there won't be a lot of fees for them? I think that's the fear that some people have. So if there's Lightning, then there's not a lot of on-chain fees, and there's less motivation to mine Bitcoin, and maybe the miners could move somewhere else that's more profitable for that amount of time. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but what do you think?
I don't really think it's happening either. Lightning is an option. It's opt-in. You do not have to use Lightning. You can do on-chain payments if you, for some reason, prefer that, and relating to some of the issues that were just raised. But the Bitcoin blockchain operates as is, and there will always be a demand for non-Lightning on-chain transactions. There will be a demand for rootstock or liquid or counterparty on-chain transactions. And the Lightning Network is just one solution to take off load and really make it highly scalable. And all those people that can use second layer solutions wouldn't be able to use a base layer. And this is true, in my opinion, for any base layer. This is not only true for Bitcoin, but other on-chain, like I said, Ethereum. They have also a higher output and a higher transaction rate, but they do not really scale on the current model as well. So they are also looking for similar off-chain scaling approaches like Raiden or Plasma or whatever. So they also have their own Lightning development in a way.
One more question? Let's say one more on the rest off-chain, off-stage. Yeah, please. Was that that hand sign? You want to ask a question? Yeah, okay, the mic. Okay, cool.
Hey, thanks for the presentation today. I want to ask, what will be the implications on exchanges when Lightning Network gains mass adoption?
Could you repeat the question again, just because I didn't understand it correctly?
What will be the implications on exchanges, Bitcoin exchanges or any crypto exchanges?
One scenario is once exchanges plug into the Lightning Network, they will be able to do what is called atomic cross-chain swaps, which means they will basically be able to offer instant exchanges to other cryptocurrencies or blockchains that have Lightning implemented in a trustless and instant manner. So from the exchange ecosystem point of view, you will be able to transact faster and exchange faster, like really fast, and also provide more liquidity in a way that will probably bring down arbitrage opportunities because they will be realized faster, and also enabling a sort of maybe second renaissance of technical innovations. I think, was it, which one, Coinbase just bought a decentralized exchange, for example. But that's more towards decentralized exchanges, and Lightning and second layer technologies it'll just make them faster and better. There's also another project called Liquid, and this is a Blockstream project. This is just an example. I'm not trying to shill for Blockstream, but they have a sidechain protocol which enables, in a similar but different way, to provide liquidity in between exchanges. So just basically all those new second layer technologies make it more accessible to a wider variety of changes and make it faster and more and less trustworthy. So more trustless in a positive way.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Dankon. Gis revido.